Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. So excited to be back here, joined live by Delynn Miller from Pursuit Institute. Yes, and excited to have one of our Pursuit coaches joining us too. We have Cheryl Greenfield, a trauma coach, and so excited to be back with you both to find out more about all that you offer, especially overcoming external influences. But first and foremost, Delynn Miller, would you mind just introducing yourself? And of course, we'll introduce
Yeah.
your beautiful guest too.
Oh, amazing. I'm so happy to be back here with you. So I am the founder of Pursuit Institute, and I am a leadership coach. And our idea behind Pursuit Institute, because I've been in this industry now for over a decade, and what I was really realizing was there's so many people on this mission as life coaches and success coaches and mindset coaches and trauma coaches and all these different kind of coaches that want to absolutely, just like you would have a coach guiding you through your sporting event, they want to guide people through their life and through their pain and through all of these sticky things that kind of come up for us as humans, but they don't have an organized way to do it. And we too get in our own way. So what I was really realizing as a success and leadership coach, I was just like, okay, I'm watching all of these coaches that are kind of getting in their own way too. And I get it because been there, done that. And I was just like, we got to get organized here, right? Because we're better in numbers. We're all on the same mission. And like we've been talking about, Jill, for the last however many weeks, we're working with a society that there's no shortage of people to help, right? So this is where we have a beautiful opportunity to come together and not just be able to support humanity in a whole different way, but also to support each other, right? So that's really the idea behind us coming together. And I'm so grateful that Cheryl has hopped on board with Pursuit Institute as well. Do you want to introduce yourself, Cheryl?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Delynn, and thank you, Jill. I'm Cheryl Greenfield, and I am a pursuit coach, and I founded Empower by Trauma. And I've been a coach now for a year and having great success with it, several clients, and really seeing the benefits of helping others. And that's my passion, is to really help people work through their trauma as I've been able to work through my own trauma.
Well, thank you both for being here. And by the way, how do we connect with you at the Pursuit Institute? Could you share that before we get started?
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can go to our website, www.pursuitinstitutecc.com. And everything is on there. You can connect. You can click on Cheryl's beautiful picture there, and you can connect with all the things that she has going on. You can see what other coaches we have available. And that's
also the app.
best.
Hello, you have an app. This is so cool. Before we continue, tell us about the app and how we use that. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's a free app, and it's called Pursue You. It's on Apple, Google Play Store. So download it. And it's like having a coach in your pocket, because who doesn't need that at all times of the day?
So true. I love it. All right. So for today, I know you guys kind of want to talk about overcoming external influences, right? Do you want to break us into the topic a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, this is where I want people to understand that a lot of the things that you might be sucking it up through, they don't have, you're not designed for that. Okay. So I very much raised with the suck it up mentality, suck it up, plow on, move forward. Things happen, life happens, move on. But the fact is sometimes we're almost re-traumatizing ourselves through not moving through the experience, the circumstance, the thing that traumatized us in the first place. And then we end up just perpetuating it in our minds. Because the fact is someone might say, move on, and you're just, what basically they're saying is don't talk out loud about it, but it's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. You will hold it in constantly. And then what'll happen is all of these, what seem like little things that'll pop up in your circumstances. Somebody says something, you know, your work does something, the government does something, and it just like is constantly setting you off. And what's happening is it's actually preventing you from rising to your fullest potential, because you're so focused on not talking about the thing that you're not supposed to talk about. And it doesn't have, it could be anything. Everybody, like what might be traumatizing to me, you might go, dude, not a big deal. Right. And what might be traumatizing to Cheryl, I
Yep.
might agree and be like, oh my God, that's crazy. So it's just every certain things impact different people. And because there's so many layers to us. We're humans. We're like human onions is what we are.
Got it. Well, how would you even describe, trauma in a sense? Do you want to kind of give us like an overview and then we'll get into dealing with that social expectation and all criticism and all of that, if you don't mind?
I would love to. So trauma is actually an impact on an individual, and it happens when there's it's a complex emotional response to something intensely negative, and suddenly your brain cannot cope with it, right? You're so overwhelmed you cannot cope with it, and that is when it's signified as trauma. And when that happens, it's typically something you perceive as life threatening or destabilizing you. So it may be something what some people think, oh, no big deal, like Delynn says, or it might be something that was life threatening to you. And it's what you recognize is overwhelming to yourself. Then it lodges in the brain as trauma. And what happens when we do this, people don't even realize it, that not talking about it, then what happens, you start building internal walls around it. And that's to help deny and avoid the pain. Forget about it, shove it down. And you start developing thought habits that are going to start protecting yourself, right? So that's that. Just ignore it, like push through it, like be a big girl, right? Like be a big boy, just push through this stuff. And then what happens, you start looking outside of yourself because you think you're no good suddenly because this has happened and you're not allowed to talk about it or shove it under the rug. So you think that you're no good, you're not worthy, and you start becoming a people pleaser to start feeling good again. And that's where you start looking outside yourself for happiness and peace, and you actually become a puppet to the external. And that is when you get outside of yourself and you are not living any of your life at that point, which is exactly what happened to me.
Ah, of course. We all have our own personal stories and journeys. Would you mind sharing yours? I think it's important to hear, Cheryl.
Okay, I'd be happy to. I will give a little disclaimer. If this triggers you, please know I might say something that could possibly trigger someone, and reach out to somebody if it does. But as a child, I had a good childhood up until the age of 12 when I started babysitting for my uncle and aunt. And the very first time when I was brought home by my uncle, he stopped the car before getting home, saying, okay, now here's the next piece of babysitting where you get the guy ready for his wife. And explained how this was part of babysitting. I was naive. I was 12. I had no idea. My mother had said, do everything the adults tell you to do. And then for that, I got extra money, which adds a whole extra layer of shame I've uncovered recently to that. And that went on for 6 years. And it turned into something naive to where I knew it wasn't right. And then threats. He was military,
Ah,
very threatening. I held this story for 45 years. When it came out, it was because he was abusing his granddaughter, and she actually came forth.
oh,
And I knew right away silence was not an option anymore. I knew that. I
yeah,
stood up, went to all the court proceedings. And the unfortunate story is, I always thought it was just me, that I was the silo, that this had only happened to me, but it happened to hundreds. So,
Yeah.
and so it's whenever you're in this situation of trauma, you're never alone. Everyone has experienced some sort of trauma, number one. And there's so much trauma that goes on in childhood, and even domestic violence later. You're never
yeah.
alone. So people need to know, just reach out to someone.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing that story. I know it's not easy, but obviously the impact of that and how you're helping the granddaughter and how you're helping so many hundreds of thousands of
Yes.
people who've been abused, who've, had any type of childhood trauma. And thank you for becoming an expert in helping people with this. So glad you guys are both here again, collaborating together at Pursuit Institute. So
Mhm.
let's move on now to what's next. Delynn, where did you want to kind of
So
digress to?
it honestly, when Cheryl and I started working together a few years ago, she had actually initially, so up until then, it hadn't really all come out yet. Then even when her and I initially started talking, she told me nothing about this childhood trauma because she wasn't telling anybody. Okay. It was just still her secret. Okay. But she knew she needed to start thinking differently. So she finds me, and or the universe brings us together. All this, it was like literally this divine intervention.
Yeah.
And we start working together. And initially, Cheryl had another business, and she wanted to grow her business. Okay, so that was her
Mhm.
mission. And it's always so interesting. And this is what I want people to understand: is you might be seeking out help because you want help with one area of your life.
Yeah.
But what will always end up happening is if there's something that you haven't moved yourself through, and it might be something really, really obvious. I'm not
Yeah.
even going to say big or small, because nothing's really big or small. It's all, I mean, it's all relative, right?
Yeah.
But for you're hearing Cheryl's story going like, oh my gosh, that's really massive. And this, oh, she's held on to it for 40 years and right. And it's like, either way, whether it was that or something else. And for you, it might be something else. If you're holding on to it, it's blocking you from moving forward in
Yeah.
all areas of your life. And it's not to say, like Cheryl, you had for those 40 years, you were a nurse, you were
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
working, like doing,
Yeah.
she was doing lots of things. But when it came down to a lot of her deepest desires and doing something outside of the box, this is where she was holding herself back. And so it was through doing, she came to, because she was like, I want to move myself forward in my business. I was like, perfect, I can help you do that. But inevitably, you guys got to know, every single time it will come out. And I know I've said this before on this podcast: what we resist persists, and what we look at goes away. So when Cheryl actually, and I still remember, like, she was attracting all these different things. And when she, we kind of laugh about it now, but it was kind of a hot mess for a bit there. And all of these things were coming in, and it was just like, okay, now we gotta look at all of it. And then that's when it all started coming out, and all the things started looking at. And it's amazing what happens when she started actually looking at it and talking about it and being open and expressing it and letting it like move through her. A whole whack load of doors opened. It's some of them, Cheryl, would you agree that you were just like, I didn't even know that this was a door. Didn't even think that that door
Exactly.
existed.
Yeah, exactly. It was
Yeah.
amazing the things that just started happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I love
But it's
your,
like it's releasing that energy and like letting it move through you, and then really letting that, instead of constantly like, if you need a visual, like picture Cheryl just constantly for 40 years just replacing the band-aid, band-aid,
yeah.
band-aid, 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 right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like, I always say this to my kids: I swear I should have like, I should buy all the shares in band-aids, because my one daughter finds a freckle and she wants a band-aid for it. But she, like, I would say to them, you have to, like, nature has built in a band-aid for you. We call it a scab. And then miraculously that scab will fall off and dot, 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 right?
Yeah.
And what happens is when you let it air, out, right now she's like, okay, now I'm uncovering it, but I've got that scab over it. I've put up some boundaries. I've like done things to like move me forward, but the band-aids off and I'm done replacing band-aids constantly, putting them on over and over again, because band-aids aren't sustainable. But just like to heal our body from a scratch, we have it in us to heal our bodies from trauma and anything. Like women, we be giving birth every day and our body just miraculously heals. It's amazing how
Yeah.
it works, right? Like it's all designed to do that, and we're designed to heal. We fight the healing.
Yeah.
as humans.
Mhm.
Ah, wow. Well, we have a lot to talk about. I mean, from the external influences impacting our own self, perception, and the role of setting boundaries. There's a lot to talk about here. So where did you guys want to kind of dive into next?
Let's talk
Well,
about like really being able to stay true to yourself in the process. What's that look like for you, Cheryl?
well, really, being able to stay true to the process, I keep close contact with Delynn, to be honest, and I have to check myself a lot. As someone who's had trauma, I became hypervigilant. I had fear of rejection and abandonment. I have distorted perception of social cues. I still have trouble with that at times. Sometimes I don't understand what people are saying and I take it the wrong way, basically. And I would internalize a lot of external expectations. So to stay true to myself, I actually have to look at those on the daily almost. I do a lot of journaling to stay in that space of being true to myself. Am I being true to myself, or am what I'm doing, do I feel like that's something coming from the external? It's an expectation for me. And so I've started setting very strong standards around this. And I hold those standards. And if I'm feeling like, am I holding that? I will start journaling about it. And sometimes a good old call with Delynn helps. Because it's important. It's important that we hold ourselves accountable to that once you learn this work. And that was key for me. I was never exposed to anything like this. I had no idea I had control over myself. I could make my own decisions.
Yep.
And I could do exactly what I wanted to do in life.
Yeah. And a lot of times we think we have it all together, and and I've talked about this before on this podcast, where we actually have two self-images. We have the one that we project to the world, and we have the one that we actually hold of ourselves, right?
True.
So on the outside, right, Cheryl was like this nurse, this mom, this wife, this grandma, this, like, she's rocking all the hats, as we as women typically do. And we've talked about that before too. We wear all these hats and we do all these things, but then we have this other piece of us that we're absolutely covering up. And when we continue to cover it up, people don't get to know our true selves, and we almost forget who we really are, right? So this process is like, it's uncovering who we really are. And that's where, like, I knew in creating Pursuit Institute that it was going to be really important for people that are helping other people whether it's heal through trauma, or we have other coaches that are working specifically with moms and babies, or with helping people with money, or helping people with their energy, or helping people with whatever, right? We have lots of different types of coaches, which is really great, but it's so important to understand that you're human too. Like, you're still having your own journey, and we get to help each other through that as well. And I know my husband Dave has been on this podcast before as well, and he's talked about, like, that whole piece. Like, he was a police officer for 15 years, right? And that whole facade that a lot of cops, they're constantly just putting it on, but then what happens is it builds up in the background, right? So it's really important to recognize and to be able to call out that inner self-image, so that you can actually get to where you want to go, versus kind of just look like you're moving forward, but you're not actually moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I
Well,
want to say too here, Delynn, if I can, just really quick, at Pursuit Institute, which was key for me, is all of the support, because you have access to a coach on a daily basis. And because we have study clubs, and you can get in those, and you have access every day. Plus, you have the support of like-minded people. So I get online every day with a group of people, and that fills my cup. That keeps me looking at myself and my goals.
And, how could our listeners really identify and challenge internalized societal expectations that could be hindering, the trauma recovery? Maybe even give us some tips to start recognizing this and obviously, the work that we could do to help overcome it.
Well, yeah. Well, boundaries, number one. Number one, you have to start recognizing why you're doing what you're doing. Is it for you or is it for someone else? And you have to have those boundaries because that's going to make the world safe and predictable for you as well. Because people with trauma need predictability. That's when they start getting a little antsy when they don't have predictability. So standards actually help that, or boundaries, whichever.
Yep.
I like to call it standards. I don't like the word boundary as well. And that's going to require some work on yourself as well. And that's why we help with that. And you have to stay true to yourself. You have to start listening to your self-talk. And I do a lot of webinars based on the inner critic and your self-talk, because if you've had trauma and you're struggling with it, I guarantee you your self-talk is terrible to yourself. And you're your worst bully. Something might have happened to you 20 years ago, and every day you're still talking to yourself about it.
Yeah.
And the bully is gone, but your inner critic is your biggest bully. So that's the first thing I tell people when we first start working together. What is your self-talk? Like, what are you saying to yourself every day? I know what mine was. Mine was terrible, terrible. So those are two things that really you need to do.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about standards, and because that goes back to like that self-talk is what re-traumatizes us, right? And just like we can have those moments, and there's nothing better than when you have one of those moments where like something really funny happens, and then you're like walking down the street by yourself and you just start laughing hysterically because you're thinking about it because it's that hilarious, right? The same thing happens with the opposite, right? Something really crappy happens, and then you're walking down the street by yourself and you could just bust into tears because you're thinking about it again or whatever, right? Like there's, and things that we don't even recognize, and some things that are even generational, like that this happened and then this happened and this, like, and it's just like, well, my mom tolerated it, my grandma tolerated it, my great grandma tolerated it, and now I tolerate it because that's all I know to do. Remember, everybody's always doing the best they can with their level of awareness. So it's up to us as individuals to raise our awareness and go, okay, what do I want to happen? What's serving me? What feels good in my life? What doesn't feel good in my life? Who feels good in my life? Who doesn't feel good in my life? And really start digging into and going, okay, like now that like Cheryl talking about her trauma, that was step 1 of 100. There's like 99 more steps that now get to happen now that first thing has happened. It's like playing a game of dominoes, right? Her acknowledging it and being like, enough's enough. I'm done keeping this to myself. That was knocking over the first domino. And now it's just going like they're all just starting to take care of themselves. But what happens is so often is we don't even recognize that we're even holding on. And this is where working with somebody else, for somebody to even go, okay, I can tell when there's stuck energy in somebody. I can tell hands down. They'll cover it and they'll think they're covering it as X, Y, and Z, but it's like, no. There's something in there that you're not saying. And that's okay. You'll say it when you're ready to say it, but you need to know that I know that something's up. And I always tell people that. I know that there's something, whether you're talking about it or not talking about it. But the sooner you talk about it, the sooner we can call a spade and start working through it, right? But this is where it's, again, getting in that environment. So as things pop up, and I mean, it's through her continuous, like Cheryl, through your continuous exposure and study and self-study and like working through all of this stuff, that you just continue to knock down those
all those dominoes.
cards as they go.
Yeah, like dominoes. That's the good word.
I'm like, wait, what's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah,
dominoes.
Well, one thing too that people can do is question your belief. Like if something comes up, question that belief. Is this true? And I love a tool. It's called the 7 Whys. And when you answer it, you say, okay, well, why is that? And why is that? And why is that? And why is that? And I could tell you by using that, I have uncovered a lot of stuff. Because once you get down to that 7th why, you're really getting to the root and the core of the issue. And most
There's no
recently for
covering
me,
it up.
it was shame.
Yeah.
That worked for me. And it's just a constant process. But that's another tool that people can use in this work.
Got it. Well, thank you so
One of
much.
the
And
dominoes.
we have just 2 minutes left in the show, so we have to kind of wrap it up shortly.
Yeah.
How did you want to kind of, end for today?
Well, what I want everybody to do, I want you to go to our website and check it out. And if you're a messenger of this material, come join us, because honestly, it is the most incredible group of coaches on the planet. And so that's number one. Number two is, if you're going, okay, there's something in me, you guys will feel if you have that stuck energy, and it might be something that's obvious, and it might not be, but this is where go see somebody like Cheryl, who absolutely can dig into it, because the faster you dig into it, and even you might be going, I have amazing results right now. You think you have amazing results. Think about how much more amazing you could be if you didn't have all this crap stuck inside of you.
So true.
Mic drop to Lynn out.
Yes, no, this is great, because you guys really provide a nurturing environment to help so many and support them. And that's why you all are here. So really, contact Pursuit Institute, go to pursuitinstitutecc.com. Don't forget about the app. And what about the book?
Yes,
Just have
wrote
to
a
bring
book
that up
about
every time. Come on.
a lot of this stuff too. Yeah. So it's called You Can't Mess This Up. You can grab it on Amazon and or on the website. You can go to pursuitinstitutecc.com.
Thank you so much, and a pleasure having you here as well. And in closing today, how did you want to sign off? What would you like to say to our listeners out there who may have experienced trauma or may not even know the trauma they experienced and why they should reach out?
I would say there is a way to live a better life. Reach out. Hands down. Reach out.
Yep.
Perfect.
Just when you think it's good, it can get better.
I love it.
Reach out.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you both being here today. Great conversation. And thank you for sharing everything and letting people know there is hope out there. All right. Have a great day, ladies. Thank you so much. PursuitInstitutecc.com. Reach out to them. Bye-bye.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.